Hi everyone, welcome to this tutorial video on how to add a double-sided end plate. So this is a continuation of my tutorial series, and what I want to look at today is to connect the two tie beams to the column at this location here. So I'm going to look at the platform beam connection, and there is a connection called double-sided end plate with safety bolt. And if I expand the preview of that, let's have a look at the input criteria of what it's actually looking for. So we just drag the window out. Double-sided end plate is beam 1 and then the intersecting beam 2. So it works on any profile and it connects the two beams and it will put one set of bolts together. So I've already got this on a favorite palette of mine, so it's on my favorite palette, double-sided end plate, and I basically select the main beam, which is going to be my column. I then right click and select my secondary beam and then the other secondary beam on the other side, and that will add the connection into place. So like all connections, the dialog box is dynamic outside of the connection, so I just want to configure the plate. Like everything in advance, we have a drop down where we can in some joints change the joint. We have a library panel and then also a joint design. This joint also will notch the beams, and this is where I will use this to connect the tie beams at the rafter after I configure the column. So I will come back to the notch in the second part, but I'm going to look at the plate and bolt section first. Here we can change the thickness of the plate. We can, let's say, set it to 15. You can see that it's changing the beam thickness on the end plate, and then we've got end plate 2, and you can see currently set the same as plate 1, so that will do the same plate both sides. So if we say, let's start with a 10mm plate in this location. I have got erection tolerances and I've got the plate thicknesses both sides. So if the end plate is the same as plate 1, it will match the same sizes. So the bolts I'm going to set, let's say, to a 16mm, and the XOX is my bolt type. So I'm going to keep that as is, leave the grade and the assemble. I have an option to invert the bolt direction, and you can see that the direction of the bolt is reversing, and you also have an option to slot the part where we can slot all components, and we could say an increase where we're slotting both the column and both plates, or we have options just to change the direction, or we can actually slot plate 1, plate 2, both plates, or actually in this instance just slot the main beam. You can see that I'm going to put none, I'm just going to leave it as is, and then we can get into the horizontal bolt section. So this will control the position of the bolts horizontally on the plate, and you can see the plate set out currently is set to the bolt edge, and then I can actually control the edge distances each side. If they're both set to 0, you will see that the plate will then be on the gauge line. We can change the center distance, so I'm going to say that I want 25mm either side of my bolt. So you can see that will do that, but I'm going to put it 2 bolts per side. We can go 1 bolt, I'm going to say okay, the center distance is 25 and there, and the offset is 0, so we can offset, we can move the position of the bolt. So I'm happy with the horizontal position, and we can adjust the center distance as necessary. So we could say let's take it in a little bit neater so that it is 60mm center to center, and you can see that this controls each of the values. If we then look at the vertical bolt section, we can start to control how the plate is set out. So we can say that it's plate from section 1, and you can see that there's a set out distance of -30. If I set that to 0, you see the way it will set the plate out from the top of the section. If we say let's put a 25mm section there, that will set the plate out there, and then we start to control the set distance. So I'm going to set it down 75, the internal distance. It's also going to be, let's say we go 60, and then we can extend the plate below, so we go, let's say 75, and we get the plate detailed as positioned. So if I just deselect this and deselect my beam, you can see that this is now what I'm starting to get in position. So I'm going to select the end plate again, advanced joint properties, and go back to the plates and bolts. So that is a position, so we've got horizontal and vertical bolts. You also have the ability to create a safety bolt section. You can see it's currently set to none. If I set it to top left, you see the way it will cut away a chunk of the plate, and then I can actually set the cut length and the cut height. So if I set that to 100, you'll see that it will give me an area that it will cut away the safety bolt. So you can place that on either side, and you can add in stiffeners as well. So you can add in a stiffener at the top, stiffener at the right, and you again control the width and height of all of these. So in this connection, I'm not going to put any of the safety bolt configurations in. I'm just going to leave it as pretty standard. Like most connections in Advance, we have the ability to control the size and the type of weld, and we also have the ability to put beam stiffeners in. So in this instance, I can put a stiffener in this position, and we can choose whether we're stiffening one member, two members, or both. We have the ability to control the width and height, and we can also set it perpendicular if we wish, and we can again, as everything in Advance, we can control the corner finish. In this instance, it's a little bit overkill for the connection that I want, so I'm going to keep that connection in play. So that's my double-sided. I'm going to quickly use the joint copy, and I'm going to select my connection and then quickly copy it over to the other side. I could use a multiple joint copy. I just sometimes find when it's just 2 or 3 connections, I'll just go with a single. So that copies my double-sided into position. I'm going to apply the connection again, this time start to apply it to the rafter, then the tie beam on the left, then the tie beam on the right, and that will then add in my connection. So I'm just going to orbit my connection round. You will see that because it's the double-sided, as I said, it will also control the size and the length of the notch. You can see that similar to the single-sided end plate, we can notch the main of a secondary beam. We can change that. So I'm going to go with the main beams notched. We can go auto notch, chamfer, trim, all these different options. We can do sloping notches. So I'm just going to leave it at 10 millimeters from the length. So that is in here. So it's 10 millimeters from the rafter, and then 10 millimeters from the detailed depth. And you can see you can control the top and the bottom if you wish. And then I just go in and I do the same configurations I do for my end plate. So again, I'm going to set my bolts to 16. I can control horizontally, so I'm going to move them in so they're 60 millimeters apart. The edge distances are fine, so I'm going to go straight to my vertical, and I'm just going to go minus 25. And you see that will just reposition. So let's go minus 21. So it puts my plate there. So let's say minus 22. You can see the set out distance is 30 millimeters from the top, which I'm fine with. Let's take the bolt up 75, let's go 65, and let's extend it at the bottom to 50, so I get a nice reasonable sized plate. You can see I've got the same options with my safety bolt, the same with my weld, and again stiffeners. So if we look at this connection, so let's put the same size plate in both sides and one set of bolts. So once I've got that in on the rafter, I then copy this connection. So it's the rafter first, then the first selection set. That will copy to there, and then again, just to finish off this model, to there, and then the final rafter to there. So that's basically a quick tutorial on how to add a double-sided end plate with a safety bolt to this advanced steel model.